Welcome everyone to the Safety Brief. Today we have Mike Hornsby and Matthew Fulmer joining in on us today to speak about your first steps into cybersecurity. To start off this conversation, I'd like to bring up the importance of understanding the cybersecurity landscape. There's many different opportunities in cybersecurity, and knowing the field that you're wanting to journey in will help you lay out the educational path forward. Any advice on that?
Yeah, Elizabeth, and I appreciate you putting this together. The landscape is obviously growing and evolving. We've talked a lot about that, but I think as it's growing and evolving, so is demand. So is demand for engineers and aspiring analysts. And I was recently traveling in Louisiana, where I was charged with talking about culture from a cybersecurity service delivery perspective. What does it look like to maintain a healthy company culture in a cybersecurity framework? Because it's a high stress environment, it's a high impact environment, meaning cyber attacks can have huge kinetic repercussion, not just on infrastructure and computers and servers, but people's jobs, people's livelihoods. And so I think it's not so dissimilar to a kind of resilience you need as any first responder. Not that it's nearly as kinetically taxing in a way physically, but you have human emotion at play. You have real tangible impact to businesses at play, and there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty in it. So I would say, really starting out, um, it requires a little resilience. It requires a little rhino skin, some thick skin of being able to work with people, soft skills, um, because again, there's a human dynamic to it. I think a lot of people see the cultural media's portrayal of the bad guy or the good guy in the black hoodie in his basement, but there is a human element. I think media really glorifies the cyber element, but there's a human element to what we do. And so, no different than hospitality, waiting tables, food and beverage, there is a human element. And I think that's something important to consider for those that are coming in, maybe for the first time.
I totally agree. There's always going to be that aspect of customer service in any kind of tech position you have. It's not just, sitting in the basement with the lights off all the time.
Right.
One thing that I would say, and this comes from being out there with Mike at one of the events, we had a number of people that came up and talked to us. And when we explained what we did and what our goal was and the vision was, the first thing they said was, "Well, I'm in school right now, so I'm not your target demographic for this." What they failed to understand, and what I politely corrected them with, was, "You are the target demographic." People like Mike, Elizabeth, myself, we've been in this industry for a while now. Guess what's going to happen at some point? We're going to retire. That means somebody is going to have to take the reins and somebody's going to have to run with it. The people that we're looking at now are the ones that are just coming out. They're just getting out of high school. They're just getting into or out of college. It's the perfect time for you to go through and start learning something that is going to be a skill set to provide a career for an extremely long period of time. Everything is becoming reliant on cyber, on tech, on automation. If you are not if you're not wanting to get into that line, that's great. But if you are, I can tell you there is a very, very long future ahead of you with learning and understanding this kind of technology.
That's a really great point. And with the wide variety of domains like network security, incident response, threat hunting, um, things of that nature, how did you go about choosing the field that you're in now? And do you have any suggestions on certain certifications or educational paths if you're going for one of those specific fields?
Matt, you've been in it longer than me. I'm curious to hear your take on that, and then I can sprinkle whatever on top.
So, not many people know how I actually got into the realm of cyber. Uh, I just kind of appeared like a magical, mystical being of some sort. I don't know. I'm trying to keep it light and happy. When I was younger, I absolutely loved computers. I was taught how to take apart and build a computer on a 286 desktop that my dad had. His plan was to upgrade that to a 486. He gave me the screwdriver, said, take it apart. Mom was freaked out because those things were super expensive at the time, but he had faith in me to be able to actually do it and do it right.
Mm.
From that point, he taught me how to code in BASIC. He taught me how to do all the fun stuff that I wanted while playing video games with me as a kid. So the time came that I was a little bit older and I was getting decent grades in school. School was not hard, honestly. Um, so I was given an option. I could have a dirt bike or I could have a computer. I mean, logical person would have said dirt bike. I should have said dirt bike. I said computer. That was the beginning of the end for me because once I had my own computer that I could do whatever I wanted with, I started learning how to break into the other computers in the house. I started teaching myself all the fun stuff that everybody wanted to learn. And I kind of just kept learning and kept growing. Got into cyber and realized this is the place that I can continuously learn and hone whatever craft I choose. There is a wealth of information that's available to you. Now, today, much easier than when I was younger because we didn't have, well, the widespread availability of information over the internet. The internet was still in its, infant stage. There was no Facebook. Google was still being run out of a garage and didn't own everything. So you had to work a lot harder to find the information. So now it's easier. You have more access. You can learn things at your own pace, how you want. Um, the certifications are much easier to actually obtain. They exist. Not only that, there's all that information. You don't have to struggle and read one book that they're going to pick the most obscure thing out of that one book to ask you on the test because they know by the time you reach that point of the book, you were bored and not paying attention. So you can make things much more fun, much more attainable by yourselves. As for certifications, as for things that I would recommend, the foundations are going to be the first thing that you have to have. If you're going to get into cyber, you need to understand what the computer is actually doing in and of itself. You need to understand the internals. It doesn't make I mean there's no point in trying to go in and fix a Ferrari if you don't understand what the Ferrari engine actually looks like, what's inside it. You're going to do more damage than good. You're going to learn from that damage, but you could have saved yourself a whole lot of trouble by understanding the fundamentals first, then getting into the advanced portion of everything. Start with things like A plus, security plus, network plus, all of your basics that you want to go into. Then you can go into getting things like your OSCP if you really want to go that route, CEH for certified ethical hacker, Pen Test Plus, just whatever path you want to actually go. There's certifications open for it. There's career paths open for it. I'm going
Yeah,
to let
that's
Mike talk because I'll go on forever.
No, it's insightful. How did we get our start? I think for me, it was it was IT first. So I was in downtown Chicago, already working at an MSP. Doing break fix, helping end users, helping existing IT teams with infrastructure refresh, network upgrades, quality of life upgrades from a systems and networking perspective. And we didn't, to be honest, it's crazy to think about, but just 2015, 2017, between those years, security wasn't really talked about. It wasn't common. It wasn't what everyone was buying. It wasn't what we were selling. It was a lot of user uptime, a lot of backups, a lot of DR testing, BCP, business continuity planning, right? So like if a snowstorm hit Chicago, what would you do if nobody could get to the office? And that was 2015, 2016. Translate that to 2019, 2020, nobody could get to the office, and so I think
Mhm.
I think it was good planning from like an MSP perspective, but security wasn't top of mind. I would say security was mainly looked at by enterprises as governance required. So if you were under governance, if you were a financial management firm, if you were a legal firm, if you were a healthcare provider, or you stored classified PHI and PII data, it was kind of top of mind. It was more of an infosec mindedness than a cybersecurity mindedness. So we want to protect people's information security, but they're two totally different disciplines. Securing information is far different than securing access. So like if I'm trying to have a password vault, I use Bitwarden and then encrypt it. If I'm using Google Chrome and I'm storing my passwords in there, not end to end encrypted, right? So that's more information security. The cybersecurity piece kind of entered, I think, when I was in the Marine Corps active for a little bit in 2018. It was more encryption from a firewall perspective. So we thought about how to anonymize traffic, how to encrypt traffic. Make sure that those that wanted to snoop couldn't snoop, and it was very much more top of mind. But that's from a military application. It wasn't private sector. And so when I came on board at Blockworks in 2019, it was very cutting edge. I think security was very new to a lot of people, specifically new to the SMB, because they weren't enterprise. They weren't, for the most part, led by governance, led by compliance, and those hadn't touched the SMB. I would say, I would venture to say up until 2020, because then it was more, uh, we got to keep business running more so than security, right, during the pandemic, and it was more uptime than security. And then it was an interesting thing because you saw the conversation shift. I think in like mid 2020, to where you had things like Teams, Zoom come under huge scrutiny for lack of encryption on servers, lack of data security and privacy, lack of proper data or information handling. And then that's when the conversation, I think, because then you saw players like Brave and DuckDuckGo enter the consumer space. Walk through an airport, you turn on the television, and DuckDuckGo was having ads, right? Like that is a very different marketing temperature than 2018, 2016, 2017, right? Like it was very different. Where you would have seen an ad in 2017, 2018 for like Skype for Business. That's what was used, Skype for Business. I'll never rest in peace, Skype for Business. But that's what was used. It was cutting edge technology for communication and uptime. No one was talking about security. No one. Very few. Very few. And so when I came on board at Blockworks in 2019, it was very new to the SMB. A lot of people at first were thinking of it as a bonus objective. It'd be nice to have, but I need my backups. I need my uptime. I need my server refresh. I need my, still then, in 2019, 2020. 2021, I think the pivot to security for all, not some, led by insurance, led by governance. So we see in the DoD side CMMC, in the private sector side CIS. Obviously, a lot of military supply chain stuff and government supply chain stuff, kind of leading that charge of saying, hey, if you interact with or work with supply chain vendors, and that was on the tail of the SolarWinds attack. Matt, what was that, 2020 or 2020? Was it
That was
2019?
that was late 2019, early 2020.
Right. And so supply chain became very top of mind because what did MSPs and SMBs all have? Remote access agents installed. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody. And those are essentially rootkits, pre-packaged, ready to go, already running with persistence, command shell access, everything you need.
In most cases, also a security account that does not ever have the
Right.
password changed on it for the pure reason that you don't change the password on it.
Or shared accounts with no MFA, right? So like shared
That
service
too.
accounts with zero MFA. And so you asked me, you got a long answer. I know, shock. But I think the pivot was really when I realized the impact that cyber attack could have. I saw the fulfillment in user uptime. People getting their job done, And that's noble. I'm not minimizing that. But there is real harm that can come to people and businesses and their livelihoods if not secured correctly and like effectively. Like because
Hmm.
there's the right tools and the right configuration. And I think most of the people we talk to get one of those, but very rarely do we see both. We see people with tools that are well intended, that push them, that install them, and then turn back into a I don't want to say complacency, but kind of like I locked the front door, I can go to bed now kind of mindset with security. Or they were hyper vigilant and they dedicated a lot of resources, but it was unsustainable. They did have a seam, they did have monitoring, but it was more of a I put the security cameras up, it's on the DVR. If something happens, we can go look at it, but nobody's watching it. You know, and so I think that's kind of that was the turning point for me in a fulfillment workplace career framework, like mindset. I think when I realized, yes, uptime's important. Yes, network infrastructure is important, of course, right? But one is the user waits for Outlook to launch. The other is the user is out of work for the week. They can't get their job done. And work won't pay them if work's not being done. So now they're out of a job for a week. And so that's kind of I think that was like as far as the soul or the calling, right, is the why we do what we do. um I think that's where it piqued my interest, was really the impact it could have if not done correctly, and the need for uh hardworking, diligent pioneers in that field, because it is a full-time job. And I think prior to 2020, it was a side hustle that IT teams did, very similar to like VoIP, voice over IP phones, or AV conferencing. Now we see dedicated teams doing that. Like AV conferencing in 2023 is almost a 4D experience. You have SLR cameras, you have huge, TVs, and it's a whole thing. Before, it was a projector and a Cisco conference com in the middle of the room. And so
Hmm.
I think, looping it all together, the calling was really when I realized the impact that lack of diligence could have on the security angle, but also having an awareness of how valuable end user uptime is. End users still need to work. If we as security operators get in the way, we've caused the very thing we seek to prevent, which is downtime. And so I think that's where Blockworks really is different, in the fact that we really heavily not rely on, but we really truly require the end user experience to be superior without a cost to security. And that's that balance, I think.
Yeah, I totally
So great
agree with
question.
that. Yeah, of course. I definitely agree with both of your points. And to kind of go off of what Matt said, I kind of had the similar background. My dad took apart and built his own computers as I was growing up. I watched him, I was intrigued. I grew up as a gamer. I was always getting hit offline and things of that nature. So, just the little tiny things kind of brought me into that first interest in cybersecurity. And both of your points bring into the fact that having that solid foundational knowledge and self development skills is truly important. And as Matt said, there's so many resources out for you guys right now, like YouTube, Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, Over the Wire. There's so many different free resources. So having that foundational knowledge before you even pick the field, or the field in cybersecurity that you're wanting to go to or toward, having that practice, that confidence, and those skills to build upon.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a journey.
It is. Additionally, industry networking and community involvement in the cybersecurity workforce is really important. For me personally, I think the first involvement I was in was LinkedIn. While I was going to my cybersecurity program, I actually found a Discord channel that was an open invite, and obviously there was all different types of skill levels in that Discord, and it just really gave me that confidence and that support when I was first learning and venturing off and doing my own thing on Try Hack Me, doing over the wire and things of that nature. I actually had my first cyber Yoda off of that Discord. Instead of spending my evenings gaming after class, I'd get on that Discord channel and we would jump into a Try Hack Me room, and we may do it together or we may be doing our own thing, but just having that little bit of like support and
Yeah.
learning opportunity can really help you hone in on those skills and your confidence as well.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a mentorship aspect that Matt touched on earlier that I'd like to resurface and unpack more because, I've had a lot of talks recently about culture, both internally here at Blockworks and externally with partners and with prospects and with people that are really trying to wrap their head around the um, how to do culture well. And so there requires a bit of mentorship and ownership. We see it in the military, and they do a really good job, or seek to do a really good job in a lot of applications around that next generation, raising up the next leaders. That's constantly top of mind and top of word. It's, hey, if you've now been mentored and led for a year, the ball's now in your court. Who are you caring for? Who are you looking out for? Who are you bringing up to become the next generation? Because we are not infinite, right? We are finite, like Matt said. And so, that's something we take super seriously, I think, at Blockworks, within the scope of our core values, within the scope of our development, getting engineers resources to learn. And that's both at work, that's outside work, that's on their own time. We try and obviously carve that training time in, but we work in a vicious industry where you can have a crazy day that is very, very busy, or you can have a fairly routine, quote unquote, routine passive day, And so the community is a huge part. I think SANS does this very well with resources for the community. I think Try Hack Me does this incredibly well for resources in the community. And there's a lot of grassroots CTFs that I think a lot of people may be intimidated by, to start off, because obviously it's competition framed. And if you've never dribbled a basketball, you may not go enter a tournament that is a basketball tournament, right? Like that is a large jump. But the beauty of it is it's time on water, it's experience, it's getting exposure,
Mm-hmm.
rubbing shoulders with people, and getting some form of learning by osmosis. You need to, if you want to be a great chef, you need to be around great chefs. Nobody just instantly becomes Gordon Ramsay, right? Like that is not how one becomes a master in their craft. If you
You
want to be great
become
at
Gordon
golf,
by getting yelled at by Gordon.
that you could be mentored by Gordon, but that requires equal amounts of rhino skin, right? Like that
Exactly.
requires that resilience. But I think the point is if you want to get great at something of any form, this could be cyber, this could be any sport or hobby, start surrounding yourself with positive role model like influence that you can visualize yourself being in 14, 24, 18 months, whatever that timeline looks like. And I say that in rather than 5 years because it's such a rapidly evolving space. You get a certification in 2023, it is null and void by 2025. Like, it's
It's null
insane.
and void like 6 weeks after you get it. Let's be honest
Yeah,
here.
it's crazy. And obviously this isn't knocking the certification vendors, but it is
No,
a lofty task.
it's the
Uh,
evolution of this
right,
entire area.
right.
Like, who thought back in 2014, 2015, when CryptoLocker made its debut, that we would be where we are now with name and shame ransomware and some of the nastiest things that we've ever seen, with our infrastructure being potentially impacted by said attacks?
Yeah.
Not many people anticipated that. Not many people were
No,
capable of actually preventing that. That's
yeah.
the most important thing. There are things now that can be done to prevent those kinds of attacks. We're not going to get into that specifically on here, but let's just say Blockworks has the capability of actually providing that capability.
No
Now,
doubt. But keep
go ahead.
going that thought. Keep going with that thought.
I have to rethink because you had something else that you were touching on.
The
Um,
mentorship
oh, actually,
aspect, the next
yes,
generation.
yes. So the one thing that I think that does not get stressed enough, it should be absolutely stressed. When you are learning, do not be afraid to fail. Everybody that I have talked to is scared to death that they are going to make a mistake. Guess what? You're going to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to candy coat it. It's going to happen. The important thing is, what do you do after you make that mistake? Do you panic? Do you curl into a ball and cry? Or do you step up, figure out where the mistake is, fix it, and not have it happen again? Learn from
That
your
Yeah,
mistakes. That is the best source of education you will ever get. If everything you do in your job is a success, you don't need to be in that job because either
yeah,
one, you're just complacent, or two, that job's just not challenging you at all. And if you're not learning something each day, what's the point?
definitely. And I think, Matt, you touched on something that's insightful because I think there's equal amounts of negative impact that can come from inaction in cybersecurity than too fast of action, right? So we've
Mm-hmm.
seen both. We've seen people that are MSPs, IT teams, they're first on scene, they get first call, right, from a breach or whatever it may be, and they immediately go to user uptime. I need to get everybody back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their mindset. That is their wiring. That is who they are programmed to be. And I am not faulting them for that. But what happens is you have an immediate team of engineers stampede over every single piece of evidence, every single piece of like some form of forensic artifact that can be used to root it back to the cause, get to the root of it. And we got out of a all hands strategy meeting yesterday with the Blockworks team, and we talked about there's issues and core problems. And a lot of firefighting that we see both operationally and from a cybersecurity perspective are very symptom directed. We are running around with a fire extinguisher, putting out the small fires when there's a propane leak on the other end of the parking lot, and that's the cause, right? Like we certainly it takes more effort, but we can stop all of this if we get to that. And that's why forensics are so important. That's why the right incident response plan is so important. But we've seen equal amounts of negative impact from too rapid of action than inaction. It's a high stakes field, high stakes industry. It's maybe paralyzing sometimes. You hear pain on the other end of the line or the email, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I've seen people Medusa'd, like turn stone cold in a phone call or an email because they understand the weight. They understand the weight of what's going on. And I think that's, we talk about how to enter the cybersecurity space, and you need to understand there will be weight. It will be heavy. And there will be impact, both good and bad, from every action we take. But to Matt's point, and this is why Blockworks makes it a core value here, like a permission to play core value, is your mindset must be there are two outcomes, winning or learning. There are two outcomes from every single situation, every single ticket, every single incident that you work, every single learning moment, right? It is winning or learning. And if you're winning, that feels great. It certainly feels better than learning. I will admit that. It feels way better than learning. Why? Because if you're in the gym doing 180 on the bench and you've been doing 180 for 5 years, you know what feels great? Doing 180 for 12 reps, and barely breaking a sweat. You know what sucks? Bringing it to 250 and you can't do one. That's humbling. What am I learning? I've learned my limits. I've learned how I can get better. But there's a humility to that. And I've seen culturally, we'll talk about this because everybody living in today's society, at least in a Western society right now, culturally has been taught to lean into comfort, lean into winning. And if you're not winning, go somewhere else. Go do something else. Go to do something that you can only win. But what's the problem? As Matt said, you learn nothing. You get a big ego and you learn nothing. And then something happens, like you get popped And then it's like, well, I'm obviously only been winning for 12 years. Where am I going to cast the blame? Am I going to say maybe I could learn something? No, no, no. I'm going to say I'm infallible. I haven't failed in years. And that's where you see blame shaming. That's where you see people get really combative in incident response. There's a lot of headhunting.
This is why there's
Like
burnout.
that's why there's burnout. And this is the industry we live in. I just got off stage 2 weeks ago talking about this. There's
Mhm.
this paradigm of, everyone's saying, oh, there's so much demand. There's so much demand for cybersecurity talent. There's so much demand. We're behind on demand. American universities are pumping out. American universities are not dead. They've been resilient. In certification industries, and just like the WGUs, as much as the SANS courses or local boot camps. We have at least 6 engineers at Blockworks that did boot camps. And they're
Mhm.
pumping out students left and right. And so, is the problem supply, or is the problem we're burning people out after 8 months?
There's a
And so
different
we're out of
problem, my
people.
friend. Completely different problem.
There's additional
There's
problems, yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
big problem. So let's use this as an example. You're looking for a job. A lot of people are. Supposedly there is a massive cyber deficit. We have a whole bunch of people that we cannot put into, or a whole bunch of roles we cannot fill. Okay. Is that a problem with the applicants? Is that a problem with the educational standards? Or is that a problem with completely and utterly unrealistic expectations for entry level roles? I'll give you a hint. It's the unrealistic expectations. There was a gentleman that posted on LinkedIn, and I follow him and I laughed completely at this. He created a programming language. The language had only existed for 6 years. He knew this because he created the language. There was a role that was posted asking for experience in his programming language. They wanted 11 years of experience in the programming language as one of their baselines. He reached out to them and said, I'm interested in this role. Can we talk about it? They came back and said, we can't submit you to the employer because you don't have the minimum amount of experience with this programming language. He responded back and said, that's cute considering it's only been out for 6 years. And they said, well, how would you know that? And he responded back, go look at the copyright. I'm the one that created the language.
Hmm.
Unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Not
You cannot
only
ask an entry level role that is going to have a CISSP, certified ethical hacker, pen test plus, and everything else, and then say, oh, we're going to pay you $35,000 a year. Dude, people are not going to walk. They are going to run away from that application. There's
Yeah.
no way they are going to sit there and be used like that. That doesn't happen.
Right. Especially when they've put money in their education.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're going to expect fair compensation. And that's why there needs to be transparency.
Right.
Lots of companies are starting to do this. I worked at this company that had a big blue logo. It wasn't a bird. It was actually successful. Shots fired. They were a silicone manufacturer. One of the things that I found when I started working there is they prided themselves on transparency.
Hmm.
You could go into their system. You could look up any employee. You could see that employee's grade, which was their rank within the company.
Sure.
What they were classified as. You could see their salary. You could see their bonus. You could go look at the CEO's information if you wanted, just to see what he's actually getting paid. But more importantly, you could look at your coworkers, the same people that are doing your job. You could go in there and look and see what they are getting paid compared to what you're getting paid. You know what that actually fostered? A lovely environment where people were paid fairly and equally. You didn't have to worry about doing a job for 7 years. They just hired somebody and they're getting paid more than you, and you've been there for 7 years. They made sure that everybody was kept very fair. It was open, it was transparent, it was amazing. You didn't hear people complaining about, Steven over in accounting is getting paid this, but I'm not getting paid this because whatever reason. No,
Right.
that was the last of the worries. It's a wonderful thing.
No, transparency is definitely important.
And to touch on that as well is not only is it the requirements are too high, but it's also, as Mike, kind of did a whole outline for us, it's a newer field. So these
Mhm.
hiring managers don't have the capabilities to understand that program was only out for 6 years. How are you requesting 11 years? I think that these companies really need to look back, do their research, and understand what is actually required to do the entry level position. Are you looking for culture? Are you looking for people who are willing to work hard and gain the experience that's needed? Are you looking for full blown, managers? And if so, then you need to switch that from an entry level position to something higher because,
Yeah.
like Matthew said, but we're not interested in those types of jobs. And if you do see something that's requiring, this cert, that cert, 7 years experience, also don't be afraid to apply. I applied to many of those positions when I was getting my foot in the door. Um, and of course, I did get some feedback. I was able to, kind of talk to them and say, like, I have the knowledge that's needed for this position. However, this is what I'm lacking in your requirements field. It's okay to have that confidence to kind of reach out to them and see if there's, something more minimal that will
Right.
replace those higher up requirements.
Some of those are
Additionally,
just arbitrary as well. Like the
yeah,
hiring team says we have to have a number, and you get somebody who's just they don't care and they're just like, fine, I'm going to send you stupid numbers just because I can.
yeah,
What they don't understand is the hiring team generally does not have a sense of humor, and they will take that and put it in there.
Right.
And yeah, they're not going to think, oh, that's too high, because unless you have a technical hiring team, they don't know tech. That's
yeah.
not what their
Right.
skill set is. Their skill set is finding people that
Right.
match what you're saying you want.
Yep.
Additionally, I would also give the advice of not being scared to apply for a position in a cybersecurity company, doing something else, and
Yeah.
providing the information to them that you're wanting to transition into something different.
Yep.
When I
Mhm.
first applied to Blockworks, I applied as a sales representative because I had sales background and I felt like that was something that I could get. Um, and I believe in the second interview, I really expressed how I'm wanting to join this team, learn the sales tactics, and then hopefully, after I have more requirements, work my way into the SOC. And having the ability to let them know this is what I want. I'm willing to work somewhere else in the company to work my way to that position. Actually, I
Right.
feel like gave me a really big a foot in, and I was actually able to land the SOC position rather than a sales position. So don't be afraid to apply. Don't be afraid to share your skills, share your knowledge, and share your goals when you're doing these interviews.
I think you touched on something really important there. This is advice for people who are starting out. How many people, when they're starting out, know exactly what they want to do for a career long term? Unless you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a rocket scientist, you probably do not have that path clearly outlined in your head yet. There's no telling what you may enjoy. I started out like Mike in IT, doing break fix stuff and everything else. It was fun, it was great. Then I started playing with malware. Then I started accessing other machines, 100% ethically, though, always.
Backpedal.
Yeah,
Backpedal,
backpedal.
brother.
Um, started, exercising, like, kind of the gray hat type stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
learning how to protect and prevent people getting into machines by learning what they were doing to get into
Right.
machines.
Those tactics. Yep.
That that started to speak to me, and I found that that was one of the main pillars that I definitely enjoyed, was helping to keep people safe and educate.
Right.
And that's kind of how I ended up where I am today. That's how Mike ended up where he is today.
Right.
Through experience, you identify what your pillars are. When you identify those pillars, you know exactly what you want to do for your career. If you find something that you enjoy and you're doing that every day, it doesn't feel like work. It feels fulfilling. It feels as though you're making a difference. Even on the days that you don't think that you did anything that made a difference, trust me, you still made a difference. Somewhere, some way, you made a difference.
And speaking about making a
Yeah.
difference. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, you're good, Elizabeth. There's one thing I wanted to unpack before we pivoted from because I know Matt had mentioned this is for entry level, those that are getting in their start. I think this is equally for companies that are seeking this talent out. You know, whether if you're a veteran CISO and you're catching this and you're hearing, hey, that's a nice, like a lot of ideal platitudes, but that's not real life. And real life is the reason my prerequisites are so high is because I don't want people to fail when they get here. Candidly, I don't want to deal with that. Why? Because who's responsible? It's like, for example, right? Like Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL, Echelon Front founder, Origin Main founder, Jocko Fuel founder. Right? This guy's got like 4 companies, man. Does more by 10 a.m. in the morning than I do in like a quarter. Uh, no, but he talks about extreme ownership as far as company culture. And he unpacked it in a way that I thought was so insightful. I shared this on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, but it was, the blame game or witch hunting when it goes to problem solving. It's like, who are we going to burn? Who's the scapegoat? Whose fault is this? They say, oh well, we didn't complete this project or this rock last quarter. Well, who was responsible for the project or the rock? Well, Fred. Okay, who's in charge of Fred? Mike. Oh, who's in charge of Mike? Bill. Who's in charge of Bill? Me. Right.
Hmm.
So is it Fred's fault? Really, truly, is it Fred's fault? You know what I mean? And that's where like it gets uncomfortable for leadership. Because if you don't make your intent felt all the way down, and we're talking company culture perspective, if you don't make your intent felt all the way down to the lowest level in the lowest trench and the newest entry level cyber analyst, right? Then there's more that could always be done. There's more that can always be done. And that's why I think we see very hands off, low liability, low risk hiring prerequisites because everybody wants a veteran. Everybody wants someone who's done this 10 years that's not going to make a mistake. Nobody wants to coach. Nobody wants to mentor. Nobody wants to take the time and train or embrace a winning or learning culture. And that's what I think so beautiful here is because we do embrace the winning and learning culture. We take people that were landscapers, movie theater managers, content creators, leather workers, real estate agents, potato chip salespeople. Like we take people that have a culture match, a hungry thirst to learn, and a drive and a motivation to be better. And we put them through this DNA training. We put it through this pipeline of CompTIA and vendor neutral certifications, and we put them in a winning and learning culture that says, "Hey, you will fail," like Matt said, "you will fail, but there's a way to fail forward." And all of these prerequisites have entry level, CISSP, CEH, 8 years experience because they don't want that liability. They don't want people to
Hmm.
fail there. They don't want to teach people. They don't want to embrace a winning or learning culture. And I think that's where we talk about key differentiators in the cybersecurity space. You got to give permission to fail and fail forward. And
You have to know
what
your
is
worth. That's one of the
you got to
biggest
know your
things.
worth for sure, but more so from like I'm thinking from a management perspective or a hiring perspective or a stakeholder perspective,
Hmm.
who's in charge of or responsible for cultivating entry level talent. You got to cultivate that culture. Now, I
Hmm.
can vouch for it here,
Exactly.
obviously, at Blockworks, but I think that's why we're seeing burnout. I think that's why we're seeing supply shortage. Because here's the reality: if your senior level in high school friend graduated and you're a junior, and they're 2 years into their cybersecurity degree, and you go start your degree, and they get out 2 years before you, they're burnt out of their job in 8 months. Homie, you got 8 more months of school before you're done. That's a little bit of a
Hmm.
crisis. You know what I mean? Like, are you now more inclined to finish that program and go into that industry, or are you just seeing a bunch of burned out people? That's intimidating. So again, I think culture is a huge cure, or I'm sorry, healthy culture is a huge cure to the cybersecurity talent deficit because it's not a body count industry. We can't put
Right.
out 60,000 cyber operators a year. We got to be cultivating and training people. We got to have a pipeline with small unit leadership that says, hey, this is so and so's first day. They're on you for the week. And they're like, well, I started here 8 months ago. And it's like, that's what small unit leadership looks like. That's what accountability looks like. The culture can't all be leadership. It also needs to be disseminated down. So I think, again, it was something to unpack because we talked about these really lofty standards of entry level. And I think the culture mismatch of, everybody's really like, we got a Tarantino kind of scene where we got guns pointed at everybody. You got cyber insurance, you got CISOs, you got stakeholders, you got CFOs paying for insurance and all this, right? And everybody's just looking for like something to go wrong so they can fire the first shot, And there's a less tense, less fight or flight posture you can have with prevention. It really can. The peace of mind, the sleep, the quality of sleep at night, and I think that's what resonates with a lot of people that partner with us is because, yes, right of boom happens a lot. We understand that. But there's a way to deal with heart disease that doesn't require a quadruple bypass. You can eat right, you can exercise. Are those things hard? Are they less sexy? Absolutely, right? Why? Because I go into quadruple bypass, my insurance pays for it, and I have recovery. I'm not saying it's a small thing, but we've gotten so comfortable with a right of boom. I'll deal with it after society. That nobody's dealing with prevention. How many people take vitamins as opposed to you believe in prevention? You know
We're
what I mean?
raising hands.
But I'm just saying it's obvious how many people exercise and eat right versus how many people are going to fall ill to something that's completely preventable. Translate that to the cybersecurity side. I believe that those entering the field really can differentiate themselves with a prevention mindset because it is different. It is less common.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the note of taking your vitamins, in the sense of the cybersecurity field, in my opinion, taking your vitamins is staying up to date with the latest vulnerabilities, staying up to date with, all the latest news and updates, establishing and excelling in the role that you've already had. So if you already have your foot in the door, it is really important to stay on top of things. Kind of like what Matt was saying earlier. This is how you're going to find the field that you're wanting to excel in. This is how you're going to hone in on those skills. And then once you are proficient and confident enough, share those skills. Be a mentor. Make a blog post. Make an infographic that's helpful to anyone else that's trying to get their foot in the door or a little bit below you. Having that cyber Yoda or someone to look up to is super helpful
Yeah.
for people getting their foot in the door. For me, it was YouTube University. That was the very first thing that taught me anything. You know, um, Opening my first VM, things of that nature. There's a lot of resources on the web and they're free. But you could also do your part as well. And if you have the knowledge and the skills, share them. Mentor.
Right. And if you've been doing it for 18 months, who aren't you mentoring?
Mm-hmm.
And why not? Everybody loves good culture, but good culture is not open a can and let it out. It's everyday grind. It's everyday care and feeding of the person to your left and to your right. And it's been a good, healthy topic I've had with a lot of people in my life that care about good culture, but have been recipients of it. And in order for anything to perpetuate, it's an all hands on deck thing. And so for those that are starting out, find, like we said, good, healthy coaches or people that you see yourself that you can emulate in the next 18 to 24 months. When you get to that point, that opportunity provides itself 12 to 18 months in. Why aren't you coaching anybody? It's not required. It's not a full job. You know what I mean? It's not these really lofty, but how do we deal with the demand? We got to bring people into it with us and bringing them into these circles of safety. And hey, this is what I learned. This is what I failed at my first 8 months, and these are the lessons I've learned my 12 months in. And I'm beating statistics every month after 12 months as a cybersecurity analyst, and I'm fighting burnout, and it's an everyday grind. And at Blockworks, we do this in a number of ways. We have internal team building, kind of like goof off Zoom calls, with the team that's abroad. We have kind of like exercise Slack channels, internal channels of like, hey, what are you doing to self-care for? We have a YOLO bus channel. Let's hop on the YOLO bus core value, talking about anything goofy, anything like light, there's some levity, and that is all their key ingredients to a positive culture. Because again, where we work, what we do, it's dark, it has high impact, it's high stress, it's high vigilance, and so you got to find those healthy outlets. and you got to find them in right circles with the right people. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, with everything good, there's always a bad group. So just be vigilant of who you're around, who you're learning from, who you're taking advice from, and obviously make sure you're talking to people with time on water experience. And if you hear anybody that's cynical, run away. There are lessons to be learned in life that don't always have to lead to cynicism. You can get knocked down and you can learn from that experience and not be cynical. And so, there's going to be a lot of veterans in the IT space, a lot of veterans that are in any space, honestly, not even the IT space, any space, anybody that's been doing anything for 10, 15, 20 years, you'll find your cynical people, and that's where you got to look at and say, hey, you know, they've been through something to lead to that. And, maybe that's not a justification of the whole industry. Maybe there's people out there doing it right. And, just keep looking, keep getting yourself into those communities, like Elizabeth said, and Discord and try Hack Me and things like that. There's a really, I got to say about cybersecurity, there is such a huge community. There's Reddits, there's Discords, there's, immediately you can walk in to any one of these servers and get helped out. Almost every CTF I've done, capture the flag experience, there's a Discord and people are helping each other out. People that don't even speak the
Mm-hmm.
same language, people aren't in the same hemisphere, but what is it? We're all working on the same goal. We all want to get better at it. And it's such an equalizing playing field that, you don't need to even know the person's name. You just know their handle. Like, I don't even know who
Yeah.
this is. I've never met them. I have no clue who they are, if they have a family or where they live, but I know that they're trying to strive towards the same goal of being a cybersecurity operator, and we're getting better by helping each other out. So I think it's very unique in that way that there is such a large army of a community that you got to get plugged in somewhere. Just got to know where to get plugged into.
Do
Yeah.
we want to talk about threats and stuff like that, or what's next on the list?
Yeah, I think we got like 10 minutes left before we run it off the reservation. We
This
can
is why
definitely
the
talk
three of us
about
aren't
threats.
allowed to talk.
Yeah,
We
you
don't
can.
ever
No, it's good
stop
content.
talking.
I think it's good content.
No, very great content. I would love to hear anything out in the wild or anything that's new and fresh threat wise. If you have something to speak about.
New and fresh. There's a couple different things that have actually decided that they want to randomly pop themselves up. One of the key ones is it's nitrogen. I mean, they're getting real clever with the naming convention of these things at this point, let me tell you. So nitrogen malware is basically it's taking legitimate applications, it's installing the legitimate applications, but then it's running scripts that are replacing key files that are then loaded. In this instance, one of the packages I downloaded was WinSCP. Like WinSCP, I love it. It has a purpose, but for the love of God, it gets hit with everything as a target because it's free and because it's easy to augment it. So they actually provide an ISO to you, which is really fun. So it actually goes based off of different ads that are on different websites. Google ads being one of the main ones, like the sponsored thing that you have up there when you search for something. Yeah, you search WinSCP, and there's a chance that one of those ads is actually going to take you to this malicious content.
Well,
So you download this package. Inside, there's an ISO. It tells you need to mount it. Obviously, standard fare. You mount the ISO, and there's a DLL file that's actually in said ISO. This one is called MSI DLL. So the MSI DLL does a lot of really fun stuff, but the long and short of this, because I don't want to kill all the time, it sets up the ability to have the C2 server running. Now, C2 is your command and control server. So what C2 server do you guys think that they're actually leveraging? Let's play a game. Let's see if either of you get it.
oh, what or where?
What C2 server?
I don't know. Is it
You
AWS,
got me.
Azure? Is it Google Cloud?
Okay, what malicious what malicious
I've seen
C2
malicious ones in every single one of those places.
Right,
Unpack
but
it.
I'm thinking a specific type of beacon that they're using.
Cobalt Strike.
Bingo. Cobalt Strike is fantastic for people that want to do pen testing. It has
Oh, it's
ethical
incredible.
uses.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. It gives you access to so many things. Like you can run Metasploit through it. You can run Mimikatz through it if you really want to. I mean, there's all kinds of fun stuff that you can do. I'm not giving away my trade secrets, but let's just say that Cobalt Strike and Metasploit are very fun, to say the least. So this gets on there and it drops the Cobalt Strike C2 beacon. So you think that's probably, oh, okay, great. They have access to the machines now, right? Well, they're going to go in, they're going to do the standard fare, they're going to get, lateral movement, they're going to get all your passwords, they're going to dump your LSAS, they're going to run it through Hashcats, they're going to get all your logins, blah, blah, blah. Standard fare. This is where it gets different. How often do you hear about threat groups leveraging each other's payloads?
Not very often. There's
Guess what they
certainly
use?
recycled and reused stuff,
They
right?
are recycled, but how often do you hear about them just flat using somebody else's payload as part of
Just
their?
copy paste.
Yeah, this one's new and nasty. So these guys went for the bad boys. They went for basically the King Kong of ransomware. They're dropping Black Cat 3.0.
So
Yeah,
are they selling it? I'm curious if they're selling it as like a delivery last mile service, right? Like it's not even their own beacon, but
as
they'll
long
get you in.
as so the beacon is theirs. The customization to the payloads is all theirs
Right.
in order to get it to load and download everything, and the augmented Python scripts that it actually uses. It's kind of interesting. It actually has a Python DLL file that they've renamed in some of the stuff that I've been looking at to Python 3.11, and they renamed the other Python, the legit one, to Python 3.11x
Hmm.
because when it goes into Windows DLL load order, it goes in order. So the malicious one will load before the non-malicious one. And it doesn't modify it. It's still technically there. It's just been renamed. So the library still exists and it can still reference that library. Python is smart enough to do that, which is really cool. So they have all of their stuff set up. Now, with these partner programs to leverage Black Cat Alpha, whatever they want to call themselves these days, and Lockbit, because, well, when Alpha decided they wanted to do something dumb like attacking Colonial Pipeline, they went away and a bunch of them came back and helped better Lockbit. So now it's basically just a joint effort with those groups. The affiliate programs, they don't care who has it. They don't care if it's a competitor that has it, because whoever is signed up as the affiliate program pays them a percentage of the ransom.
That's right.
So they don't care. Their job, they are now officially just a payload as a service
They're
at this point.
couriers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
they're couriers.
crazy.
It's
Yeah.
smuggling payloads onto environments, and I don't know what the
And
shipping crate. I was just paid to
MSPs.
deliver the crate,
they will work with them
right?
and leverage their resources to where, the same name and shame stuff, posting it to
Right.
their hidden stuff on the dark web. So you can see everything that is available. I mean, they give you all of that when you're an affiliate. So these people that may not want to have to create their own payload or may not have the knowledge to create their own payload, they still have the ability to drop it. And that's what this thing is doing. And it's exploiting already existing technology that's out there. All they have to do is provide a legitimate ad. Now, here's the thing. They can do the same thing on Facebook. Did you know that Facebook, when you pay and put an ad on there and you put a link
I
in that
do.
ad, they do not validate the link.
That's what I was going to ask. If Google Marketing was
Uh-huh.
doing any form of like
They
validation
do not.
of where the link leads, or no, that's fascinating.
No, they do
Fascinating.
not. And that's why I've been seeing a lot of ads popping up on Facebook for things that seem way too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's basically what it is. They're trying to exploit the ad market and target people that are in security to be able to try and get access to their stuff, because they're going to look at it and say, "Oh, this is a good deal." Okay, look, it's not as good as getting Shodan for a lifetime for $5. All right. That was legit from them. So if you see something like that saying, a too good to be true ad, just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This thing is going to nuke a lot of people. The good news is our solution shuts it down before it can even get that payload or get the DLL file to alter any of the stuff.
I was going to ask if you had the opportunity to toss in the lab yet.
That's what I was doing while we were talking. I was actually
That's what you do when you tell me to go to sleep at 1 a.m. and you're still up.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Sounds right.
probably.
Sounds right.
But as you can
Oh,
see,
good stuff.
it is really important to stay on top of new vulnerabilities and things coming out. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this knowledge. We wouldn't know if our services actually prevented it. So it is important to test your own services, play around in the VM, analyze things if you're comfortable with it, or, do your research. I want to thank you both for a wonderful discussion,
Yeah, this was fun.
and great insights. Um, my word of advice is just remember to embrace challenges, stay curious, and be proactive in skill building. So thank you all so much for joining in today, whether you're joining in live or from our video aspect. Good luck and stay frosty.
Thanks, everybody.